You're listening to Missing Panther.
It had very long tails. It moved like a cat. It was huge.
The panther that I saw back in '96 is bigger than my current dog. And I'm absolutely convinced that that's what it was that I saw.
It's not something that every kid sees every day, a lion walking through the schoolyard.
Well, you wouldn't know what we saw this morning. We saw a black panther.
It jumped from 2 1/4 lanes to the median strip and then straight in front of me to the other side. It had to be a panther. It was huge, it was black.
But amazingly, a truck left Sydney with 7 lions and arrived in Perth with 6.
Officers were, rushing out of the station with big guns and the black overalls on. He told me that a lion was on the loose.
I got the phone call that a lioness had escaped from the circus. To be honest, I thought they were winding me up.
There's been many theories over the years to explain the sightings. It could be an escaped circus animal, or even a one-time exotic pets.
There are lots of theories about why the panthers are here. One is that panthers escaped from a circus way back in the day. It's not an absurd theory.
I've actually spoken to a circus owner probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, who actually admitted to me that he had lost a big cat in the Australian bush.
When word got out I was on the search for people who believed they'd seen a panther or a big cat, my inbox became flooded with stories. Some happy to chat on the record, some just wanting to share the experience. The one thing I noticed that many of these witnesses had in common, whether a skeptic or a believer in the beginning, was that their experience had changed them. A new obsession was born, all having the same recurring thoughts. What was it that I saw? Could it be this fabled big cat they all speak of? So many of these witnesses went on to do their own research on big cats in Australia, not only for their own interest, but to put to rest any thoughts they may have had that they were going crazy. So it was only wise that I picked their brains on what they'd uncovered so far. The story of US servicemen bringing pumas and panthers as mascots to Australia in World War II seemed to hold a lot of weight according to most, and having it supported by the puma study conducted by the Deakin University made it a hell of a lot more plausible. Being ordered to put down the very big cats that represented their fighting units seemed like bad karma for the US troops, not to mention that these were their beloved pets, who kept them company throughout a traumatic time in their lives. It made absolute sense that these big cat mascots were released in secret right across the country. But this wasn't the only theory for the arrival of big cats to our shores. Some believe that these panthers were fugitives from a circus or a zoo. I have to be honest, the whole idea of a big cat escaping from a circus, making for the hills to start a new life, seemed more like an urban legend, or perhaps even a story you'd read to your kids at night. But with so many people convinced of this as a possibility, it was worth checking out. Flicking through old news articles, I found stories of circus escapes dating back to the 1800s. The lucky ones would get caught up in giant cast nets and dragged back to their cage, but the not so lucky were shot dead on the spot. On the 23rd of February 1914, it's 8 a.m. in Melbourne when a 17-year-old girl goes outside to see what's disturbing some fowls in her garden, only to be confronted by a leopard. The big cat leapt towards the poor girl, who fainted and somehow remained unharmed. The leopard, which had escaped from the Melbourne Zoological Gardens, was later shot and killed. The 13th of September 1950, as family and friends of Bondi watch the amazing lion show from the travelling circus, the fun stops within seconds as the lion jumps into the crowd. As everyone panicked and ran for the exits, the lion was eventually lassoed by ropes and put back in the cage. The stories were endless and left me with too many questions, so I knew this was an avenue I really needed to explore. So I went looking for stories on the topic to see what can go wrong in zoos and circuses for escapes to happen. Strangely, my research brought me to Broken Hill of all places. Deep in the far west of New South Wales, Broken Hill sits on the edge of the desert. It's also the gateway to a part of the country that's so dry and isolated that many explorers in the past who dared to enter never returned. On a sleepy Sunday afternoon in March of 1997, an off-duty police officer, Mark, was about to nestle in and enjoy the rest of his day off when he received a call. A call that would go on to be one he'll never forget.
Well, look, I was actually at home. It was from memory, it was a Sunday afternoon. I'd mowed all the lawns and cleaned the pool and stuff, and I was about to have a beer, and I got the phone call that a lioness had escaped from the circus. And they said, look, Bish, you've been activated. I was in a unit called the State Protection Support Unit, which we were a country unit attached to the State Protection Group in Sydney. And part of that role was dealing with high-risk incidents. And to be honest, I thought they were winding me up. She'd been released from the circus by a 14-year-old kid. Now, where the circus was on a series of cricket ovals. Adjoining them was a series of soccer ovals, which had an embankment with saltbush. When the circus people became aware the lioness had been let out, they put all their circus trucks in an arc around this embankment with the saltbush. Now, the vet was there actually at the scene before me. I've rocked up with a high-powered AR-15 rifle. He's actually handed me the tranquiliser and said, I'm not paid to tranquilise lions, you are. Years ago, I'd heard stories about lionesses and stuff, how they can camouflage themselves in long grass, and I could not see where she was. All we knew was that she was somewhere on this embankment. None of us could see her. The bloke that was in charge of the lions from the circus, he was there nearby, and he said to me, he said, look, she's more scared of the public and people around. He said, she's the tamest one we've got, and she really won't harm anyone unless she really has to. And I thought, well, you know, she's been hand-fed and whatever. I thought, she'll be all right. So I took the tranquilizer gun. Look, it's like a normal gun, but it's obviously got the dart in it. But the way it fires is with a blank fire cartridge that compresses the air enough to fire the dart. Now the dart might only travel 30 metres maybe at the maximum, and they're highly unstable. They're inaccurate to buggery. I walked with the lion tamer up onto the embankment, and we were searching the saltbush. No, I couldn't see her, and I remember it had a telescopic sight on it, which wasn't much good in any case. But I remember looking through the sight and trying to look at each and every saltbush that I could. And we'd been up there for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and all I caught was a flash going across the sight. Just a blur of movement, and what it was the lioness charging off the side of this embankment, and she went straight under one of the carriages that was in, like trying to block her in. It's interesting because, you know, you would think that once people heard there was an escaped lion, you would stay at home or stay in your house. But no, Broken Hill people all want to come and see this escaped lion. Now, at this stage, there was probably 300 people, kids, mothers, fathers, you know, people standing around, all wanting to see this lioness, either shot or tranquilised. So when she charged off the hill and went underneath the carriages, it was like parting the Red Sea. People were throwing kids over fences and you know, just running and screaming everywhere. Another police officer and I, Steve Gentle, we chased after her. Obviously, we're nowhere near as quick as she was, but we saw her suddenly do a right turn, and she ran down a driveway into a residence there. Now, as she went down the driveway, she ran into the backyard. Now, there were two blokes on the back veranda cooking a barbecue and having a couple of VBs. Next second, this lioness has run past them at a rate of knots further into the backyard. So, of course, they'd panic, drop their beers and run inside and started ringing 000 and all that sort of stuff. Steve and I went to the next house further on and then crept down along the fence line. And when we got to the backyard, there was a fence adjoining the yard that she ran into, and we sort of popped up and had a look over that. And here she was, I don't know, maybe 15 metres, 20 metres away from us, and she wasn't happy. She was growling and carrying on. Steve had he had an AR-15 with a 20-round magazine attached to it, and he kept her covered, and I lined her up with the dart gun. Now, I'd never fired a dart gun before, so I've lined her up and squeezed the trigger. Nothing happened. So I've checked to make sure that the blank fire cartridge was in there, and I've gone to line her up again, and I've worked out that the vet hadn't actually screwed the barrel into the gun all the way. So anyway, I screwed that back in until it actually clicked lock. So anyway, I've come up again onto target and fired off the tranquilizer, which hit her in the back, or towards the back hip. And at this stage, she went aggro. She did maybe 10 sort of half charges. She'd run towards us, then she'd break, and then she'd back herself back into the corner of the adjoining yard. All I had was like my handgun, my Glock, and but Steve had his AR-15, so he would have been very, very close to letting her have it. Interesting story. A line tamer at this stage crawled down to where we were. There was a little laneway behind this yard where the lioness was. We could hear people in the laneway. And the line tamer says to me, if she gets over that fence and into the laneway, he said, you might as well shoot those people. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, they will die a horrible, painful death if she gets into the laneway. And I said, you told me she was the tamest one you had. He said, that was only to get you up on the side of the embankment to tranquilise her. He said, she will kill you as quick as look at you. So anyway, we waited there for about half an hour, and the tranquiliser didn't seem to take too much effect. So I went back out and found the local vet, and he gave me another tranquiliser, and we loaded the gun up, and I went back in and put another tranquiliser into her. And after about another 15, 20 minutes, she finally went to sleep, and she woke up back in her home in the circus truck. Realistically, I suppose our job was to ensure that no one was killed or injured, and if it came to it, we possibly could have had to kill her. And really, you can't have a lion running around the centre of like a populated area. Like if she had escaped that backyard, we would have been in big, big trouble. And really, I have no doubts that there was the possibility that she could have killed someone.
Mark alerted me to a similar event in Broken Hill 12 years earlier. In 1985, police were called to the edge of town when a road worker came face to face with a lion gnawing on a sheep carcass. Only this time, no one came forward to claim this big cat. Being 1985 and having no easy access to a tranquilizer gun, a young officer was faced with one of the most difficult decisions of his career: to take it out when he had the shot, or risk this unpredictable animal slipping away to the nearby township and unleashing unspeakable horrors. With only moments to think, the officer made his choice. I spoke with Alan, the local photojournalist, who was called out to the scene to try and get some photos for Broken Hill's local paper, the Barrier Daily Truth. Alan briefly tells the story as he remembers it.
Well, I got the phone call and he said, get yourself out there, there's a lion loose. I said, oh, where the bloody hell did it come from? Nobody knew where it came from. I never ask, I just do, and if it stuffs up, bad luck. But I always go, I never question anything, and I never knock anything back. That's it, whatever happens, happens. And that, you become a good photographer, a good press person if you do that. So I shot out there, it was a few kilometres out. Next one, it popped. off it goes. So when we got there, the culvert, here it is, it's dead. It's shot through just below the eye. You know, being isolated, I can understand the dilemma they were in. Being isolated, you don't just reach for a dart gun to put it to sleep. There's one in the town itself. There probably would have been one there. So it would have been a dilemma to try and figure out what the hell they were going to do with it. Yeah, I suppose you know, you can't just pour the bucket over the cops for doing what they did, I suppose, in a way. It was just a shame. It was just awful. They had to make a decision about something. And it was a lion. It wasn't, you know, it had bloody claws on it. Should have seen it. We tried to figure out where the closest circus was near there. So we sort of figured somebody must have had it in their backyard and somewhere like a private zoo. You can't just have a lion and not register it. This is what, unless you buy it under the counter, like I reckon this thing was. You don't know what people have got in this country, honestly. There's some weird animals there. I mean, there's in Sebastopol here, there's a guy, I walked in his place one day and he had a crocodile in this bath out the back of his place. It was 2.5 bloody metres long. It was slashing around and frightening the shit out of me. And here he is in built up area, like in his house. It was in his house.
Although Mark wasn't on duty that day, he remembers the story quite well.
Where the culvert was in the dry creek bed. They couldn't set up an enclosure or anything like that. Who's going to walk close enough to put netting out, and where do you get netting at Broken Hill to capture a lion? And at the time when they found her, she was actually feeding on a sheep carcass. Even with a dart gun, they would have had to have got too close to her. So, if she had escaped, she could have killed anyone. She could have killed any of the local farmers, and she may never have been seen again. Who knows? Realistically, and this is my point of view, he had no option. He had no option, because if that lion had escaped and killed someone, he would have been the worst in the world, and he would have had questions to answer at a coroner's court as to why he didn't shoot it. In my opinion, he did what he had to do.
I spoke briefly with Tabby, the local vet, who told me in very few words what he discovered about this cat a little later on.
Oh, yes. Well, no, they never found out where that lion is. But amazingly, a truck left Sydney with 7 lions and arrived in Perth with 6, but that wasn't the lion involved. They were transporting lions from Sydney to Perth, and obviously one lion there miraculously evaporated on the way, and another lion miraculously did a Doctor Who and ended up in Broken Hill.
Just when I thought 2 escapes in one of Australia's most isolated townships was quite bizarre, Mark goes on to inform of another, which he found in the local historical records.
Well, actually, there was another one. About 1915, it was another circus in town, and a lion got out, and one of the local police sergeants at that time, I can't think of his name, but he tempted the lion back into the cage with a big piece of beef. But it's amazing, isn't it? Like one town in far western New South Wales has had 3. I was actually stationed at Redfern in Sydney. I wanted to get out of Sydney, and I think it was the roster sergeant at Redfern said to me, he said, "Go west, young man. You won't regret it."
The next story takes us all the way to Goulburn, home of the world's largest sheep made of concrete. At 90 years of age, Ollie, a property owner on the edge of Goulburn, tells me her story of a panther she saw in the early days and how she believes it came to be here.
It used to be down the railway line, and it was there for a while, and you used to see it going up and down and that sort of thing. If you walked past it, it'd just lay there and look at you. If you stopped, it'd jump up and take off up the quarry. Well, never took any notice of it, sort of thing. I always thought it got out of Worth's circus. The circus had been up there under the bridge on the flat, and it was after that had gone that the panther started being seen, and I always thought it got out of that because there was a fella came down here from the circus. He thought he was a smart ass. He was having a look around. He was looking for something, but he wouldn't say what. And that's what made me think all the more, yeah, that got out of the circus and he was looking for it, but he wouldn't say. He said, had you seen anything strange about down here? It was here for about 12 months after the circus had gone. And then all of a sudden it just disappeared. Whether it found a mate or not and went off, I don't know. I like animals, and they was always going down around the railway line shooting, you know, anything they could move. I just let it be because I thought some of these smart asses would go and shoot it. I think that's a one-off. I've heard of them being down Tolong in the National Park and that down there, but never ever heard of them about here. We never even told friends and that about it, but Jeff's seen it, and then because, like, he lives on one hill here and I live on the other, and the quarry goes down past over from me, and then Jeff could see it off his veranda. Then all of a sudden it sort of disappeared and we never seen it no more. Ruth and Jeff would have seen it too, because from their place they was looking over at the side of the quarry and you could see it when it would walk down there. But I still say that's where it came from. I've always said it came from that circus.
Years after the Panther Ollie claimed to see disappeared, Jeff and his wife Ruth, who lived next door, saw exactly the same thing strolling across their paddock.
Well, we were sitting down having lunch because we're just on the outskirts of Goulburn. We own 20 acres where we live. A lot of it's got bush around it, and it just came up out of the bush. And we were watching it where we were sitting at the bench, and she raced in and I'm going to take a photo of that. So she raced in and he got up, and I thought, oh, geez, he's going to get away on her. But she was lucky. She got in and got a couple of shots, which actually they published. So they were reasonably good shots. Oh, it went in papers all over the place. It was much bigger than a feral cat. It was bigger than an Alsatian dog, but it was smaller than the Shetland pony. It was a big bugger. There's no doubt about that. I know of at least 4 or 5 people in Goulburn that have seen the same one, and it was soon after we saw it. A friend of mine was walking his dog just near the War Memorial, and his dog went crazy one morning, and this was about only a day or 2 days after we saw it, and his dog went crazy, and the dog had the Panther bailed up in this people's backyard. As he said, I was only about 20 metres from it. Well, the dog didn't get it, but he got over the Panther got over the fence. But Kevin just straight out, he just said, no one's going to bullshit to you about this bloody Panther, mate. He said, I've just seen it. He was dead set that it was the same Panther. Our next door neighbour, she had sheep, had their throats chopped out and killed both of them. And the sheep that she had are what they call dorpers, and they're a fairly big sheep. They're more than a normal sized sheep. And we left the carcass in the yard for 3 days, hoping that it would come back, but it never ever did. So we had to shift the carcasses then because they were starting to rot. Channel 7 came up. They spent quite a long time here with us. We had people ringing us from all over the bloody world. 2 people rang from England because I talked to them, but we had probably 4 or 5 overseas calls. One bloke wanted to come out. He wanted to come out here regardless and talk to us. Yeah, but he never did because I turned him off it. I said, look, mate, I'm just getting driven bloody nuts with this. I don't want any more of it, thanks. As much as I appreciate your phone call. And he said, you know, I'm a fanatic for this sort of thing. He said, I like to come and do it. And I said, look, I'm sorry, I can't. So I didn't. He never came out. Honestly, we started to get selective with the phone calls. We had to, yeah. We didn't want everybody, Tom, Dick and Harry, coming out here with the shotguns. And that's exactly what would have happened. And I just tell people, no, we don't know anything about it. These bloody people, there's plenty of cowboys around. Well, when you explained who you were, I knew that it wasn't some bloody hillbilly with a shotgun looking to see if they could come. Yeah, when you explained who you were, I was quite happy to stop and talk to you. Channel 7, they just rang and said, we're here. They didn't say, you know, can we come? They just said, we're here. Are you here too? But at least 4 other people, and they're people that I knew or know. They all said that they got away from one of the circuses when the circuses were in town. Well, if there was a couple of them, they could have started to breed. Anyone that thinks a feral cat is as big as this bloody panther, no way. They'd want to magnify a feral cat a lot of times, an awful lot of times.
I was able to get an ad placed in a circus magazine called Fanfare. This allowed me to reach out directly to ex-staff members and owners of the circuses. I was contacted by Robert Perry, whose family have owned and operated the Perry Brothers circuses since the early 1800s. Robert just wanted to pass on a few stories of escapes from the Perry Brothers circuses that had been handed down to him over the years. This is what Robert had to say.
Yeah, my dad was one of the original Perrys. The 4 brothers, Albie, Dummy, Jimmy and Teddy, and 3 sisters. The original Perrys ended about 1947. But I remember him saying it, a long while ago. He told me later on that he thinks one got out around Glen Innes somewhere. I think he said that they could have escaped. He was talking about it, definitely Panther he was talking about. I know it was in the Glen Innes area at the time. Now we're talking back in the 1930s. We used to show Glen Innes, we showed it quite a lot. Like 25, well after the bloody Panther family got out. And then over different times they've been talking about the Emerald Panther. Something about Emerald and Panther, something so could have got out from the circus, yeah. But he said it could have been one of Perry's. I heard him say it, you know. You hear these things, don't you? And I suppose anything's possible. I had another one you might have brought up at Enverell on my birthday, which was the 3rd of April, 1942. On the 2nd of April, during the war, they had a transporter was carrying the tigers and a mandrill. Anyway, the truck tipped over. The bloke was drunk, I believe, the local carrier. And the tiger got out and ate the mandrill, killed the mandrill. And then the police come up and shot the tiger. In 1966, we were going up north. I don't know whether you know the Guffalonga Railway crossing. Yeah, anyway, it's just south, I think. It's well south of Townsville. And a train hit one of our trailers. And 2 monkeys got out, would you believe? A male and a female. Anyway, animal quarantine said, once if you don't get him, we'll put in a professional animal catcher. He could be there for 85 years. So we sent down 2 blokes on the circus. They were there for about a week. Anyway, they caught one and the quarantine didn't worry about it then once they got the male one. So there could be no breedings.
When I put the word out that I was looking for information on circus and zoo escapes, I received quite a number of calls from one particular area west of Sydney. Around Warragamba and Mulgoa, there's been more than one zoo over the years, and all of them housing quite a few big cats. Megan, who grew up in the area and lived alongside one of the zoos, saw something on her way home from work one night.
About 14 or 15 years ago, and I was a nanny for a family in Cobbity, and they had a private road that they shared that linked up between the back of sort of Cobbity and the back of Greendale, which is out near Wallacia. Coming home from work, and it would have been about 6 o'clock, I think. It would have been like quite late. As you sort of, wind down, it kind of goes down into a little bit of a dip, and then you've got to drive back up, and then there's a top gate to let you back out onto the main public road. And driving up and stopped my car, and I was just about to get out of the car to open the gate, and just as I glanced, obviously, to open my door, to the left of me, there's, bushes and things. And I saw these 2 yellow eyes and a face of a very large cat. And then all of a sudden it obviously saw me and ran. And then I just saw its huge long tail dive into the bushes. And I was like, what was that? At this stage I was like, I'm not getting out. What if it comes and attacks me or something? And you couldn't have turned around, like done a U-turn where I was. I sort of got up the courage and jumped out of the car, opened the gate, sped through, and then I had to shut the gate again. I wish dash cam was a thing then, because it would have been caught on dash cam for sure. It was more than just like, a bigger cat. It was the size of a panther. It was huge.
Growing up next door to the Warragamba Lion Park, Megan remembers sneaking over the fence a few times so her and her friends could get a glimpse of some exotic wildlife.
So the lion park had been closed for years. They still had the lions living there, so we used to go in and try and look at them, and we used to get bloody chased by buffaloes. Obviously my parents lived just opposite where the lion safari was. You hear the lions roaring at night and things as well, and it was pretty cool growing up there, to be honest. But yeah, they could, I suppose, kids or anyone could have gone in there and climbed that bigger cyclone fence and then got in.
Late one night in August of 1995, some teenagers took to the fence of Warragamba Lion Park with some snips, cutting out a hole big enough for kids to get in, but also big enough for big cats to get out. That night, a local detective received a call to attend a lion wandering the streets. The detective, somewhat humoured about the call, soon realised this wasn't a hoax when a lioness walked right out in front of his patrol car. The hungry lioness then scaled a residential fence to address her appetite, which unfortunately happened to be Boffin, the family's pet border collie. Megan shares what she remembers about the night of the escape.
They escaped and actually mauled and killed the poor dog. We were like, gee, the lions are loud tonight, because you didn't think anything of it living there. You always heard them roaring, overnight. Yeah, so we didn't really think anything of it. And I remember Mum saying, God, the dogs are going off tonight. All the dogs were barking and it was really windy, I'm pretty sure, that night too. And I kind of didn't really think anything of it. And then the next morning we got the news that they'd escaped and killed a dog. And then from memory, I think they shot the lion.
I managed to get in touch with Craig Bullin to see what he remembers about the night of the lion escape. Craig's family have a long history of owning and operating the Bullin circuses, as well as drive-through lion parks and zoos all over the country. Although at this time the Warragamba Lion Park was out of operation, Craig's family still owned the park and looked after the animals inside. Craig remembers the night of the break-in well and was only too happy to share it with me.
I remember it as plain as day. 5 got out, we shot one and we caught the other 4. Okay, there's nothing in the media about the 4 that we caught. What a great job. All there was that poor lion that got shot because and then it was shot because the situation where the lion had got itself into, you're starting to talk about people's safety. There's so many things that unfortunately the safest thing was to put that lion down. The fence to the compounds, it was cut. And whether it was done that night or the night before, we really don't know. As much as we would check our boundary fences, we got a familiar vehicle that they associated food with. It's not rocket science, even though it was 2 o'clock in the morning. We got a familiar vehicle with meat in the back of it, and those cats know the sound of that vehicle. They know what it looks like. It's ingrained in them because that's what they associate every bit of food they've ever had in their life with that vehicle. And we said, come on guys, let's go. And they followed us over. We actually put them back through the cut in the fence. Unfortunately, the circumstances, how it was, we didn't want to shoot it, but, there's so many other aspects in play, and it's just unfortunate. As I said, Ben, we've had all sorts of stuff escape. And, they've been escaped for at least half an hour. We've had situations where, someone's left the door open. You're only as good as your staff sometimes. And the cat's gotten out and it's been between the safety fence and its enclosure. But it's still got a safety fence in front of it, and for all intensive purposes, that animal still thought it was in its cage. We've had a couple of those instances over the years. We've had big cats actually get out and go for a walk around. Then over the years, we've had animals escape, whatever they'll be. We've had everything at some point. Most zoos have had something get out at some point. Those animals are looking to get back into their cage. They want to go back to their sanctuary where they know they're safe. They don't want to be out in the big scary world. They want to get back to something that's familiar, and, you know, anything that's perceived as being dangerous, the animal is going to attack, it's going to do this and that, it's actually a fair reaction, I think. It just wants to get back to where it knows normality, where it's comfortable. I.e., that's why we bought the truck that they used to get in their food from, to try and get some familiarity back to them so they can go, oh, hang on, things can't be too bad. Here's our meat truck. It's an experience thing, you know. You don't read it in a book, but you just know this stuff and know how captive animals think. The lion, the one that did get shot, grabbed the pet dog. That's a very normal behaviour for a big cat. You walk a dog on a lead past any big cat cage, the cat's going to look at that dog as dinner. It's little, it's moving, you know, that's that prey instinct that you don't breed out of animals like that. It's always sad when there's an animal that you've had generations of its parents and stuff, you know, it's always sad when something like that dies.
Mel grew up in the area and remembers a separate incident of an escape that her and her classmates still talk about to this day.
All of us kids obviously asking what's going on, and they just said, we're in lockdown, there is a lion in the schoolyards. Us kids were so eager to get up and look out the window, and because we wanted to see the lion. I just remember the teachers locking us down, like we weren't allowed to go out of the classrooms. They let us look up in the window. I was down in the bottom classrooms, and you could see out the window where the lion was walking up and down the back school fence line. He was on the inside. He was actually in the school grounds. I do remember, like clear as day, the lion walking up and down the fence line and then turning and coming towards the classrooms, basically, the quad area. I remember seeing the zebra car come into the school, like drive into the school, and then that's when it was gone. And we were safe. We walked out of the school, we walked home. There was more excitement than anything. Like, it's not something that every kid sees every day, a lion walking through the schoolyard.
Michelle, an ex-staff member of the zoo, tells me a story of coming face to face with what she claims to be a lion on her property, long before the break-in at Warragamba Lion Park.
I worked at the African Lion Safari for 3 years. I lived on 60 acres and it backs onto the Blue Mountain. On our side is Warragamba and all that. And I thought it was really strange that we had heaps of kangaroos, you know. We used to skip through our properties and everything. And they all disappeared. And I thought, oh, well, they must, you know, migrated somewhere else. That's what I thought until I seen this lion. At first I thought, you know, it was a Jersey calf. And then when I turned around and looked and seen the mane, I thought, well, that's a lion. It was definitely a lion. But it wasn't a fit lot. It was weak. It was very weak and thin. You'd see the bones on the back of its rump. And it was an old lion. It wasn't a young lion. So maybe that's why it didn't attack, because it was probably looking at me as if to say, give me something to eat. And just kept staring, so I just kept my eye straight on its eyes and just slowly moved backwards up the steps. I got inside and then I went to grab the phone, and then I thought, oh, I'd get my camera and take a photo of it because no one's going to believe me. And by the time I grabbed my camera and went out there, it was gone. From then on in, I was pretty scared because I didn't know if it had come back.
I began to look into another zoo in the same region of Western Sydney, which for years has been surrounded by rumours of escapes and releases, possibly due to the high number of sightings in the surrounding bushland. This particular zoo was eventually closed under the Exhibited Animals Protection Act for holding prescribed species without a permit. It's unclear of what happened to all of the big cats from this facility when it closed down. Some of the tigers and jaguars were sent to other zoos. Some say the rest were euthanized, but the true fate of the remaining big cats is still a mystery. When I began to dig around and ask questions about the zoo with ex-staff members, I was met by a strange level of fear, many wanting to share their story with me as long as I wasn't recording and didn't use their names. These are just some of the communications, but not the actual voices.
The guy was a nutter. If I were you, I'd just stay away from anything to do with him. He was dangerous and well connected, and when any of the animals entered those gates, they had no idea of the misery that lie ahead. Please don't use my name in the podcast.
I have no words for this man. I can't because there's just no way to explain him. People have likened him to the Tiger King, but honestly, it's more like the Tiger King times 10. If you do anything about him, just make sure you approach with caution. I can't sugarcoat the man. He was a maniac with power.
Although working there was a great period in my life, it was a dark period for the animals. That's my only comment. I'm not interested in your podcast. Do not mention my name and don't call or email me again.
The more people who tried to turn me off exploring this dark alley, the more curious I became. Eventually, I was able to get in contact with an ex-staff member. Gary worked at the zoo for quite some time and was more than happy to tell his story. Gary shares his experience not only with the animals in the zoo, but also the extremely wealthy and eccentric owner.
He was an egomaniac. He just wanted to brag. He used to try and present himself as someone that cared about the animals, and he didn't. The way he was feeding them, that's if they got feed, because there were times when they didn't get food. As I said to you, I've never been so disgusted in my life with the way and not just the big cats, it was all the animals. He used to take business associates out to the property, and it'd be, look what I've got, and he'd be quite cavalier with the way he'd present animals. I was never comfortable with what he was doing. I know that there were 2 black panthers when I was there, male and female. I know he had 3 or 4 mountain lions. There were times when I was there that animals were gone, and it was, I've sold that one on. And it'd be, well, who moved it, you know? I suspect it was private owners. I never saw any of the freight manifest. He was very, very cagey when it came to paperwork. We were never allowed to talk to any officials. You know, we'll put to work, here you go, do the gardens. Or mysteriously, half a ton of carcasses would turn up. We'd be told to feed the animals. All inquiries would be referred to him. When inquiries started being made, and bear in mind, he couldn't resell these animals to circuses because circuses were shut down as far as wild animals were concerned. And the only other way was through his network of, you know, rich, seedy mates. Some of the characters I saw there, like, I wouldn't trust a roadkill with them, you know, absolutely shady. He didn't regulate and didn't document any breedings or interbreeding. And the enclosures were very, very basic, very rudimental. They were concrete floors, you know, maybe a little bit of hay or some blankets thrown in there, you know, a watering trough and a feed bucket or a feed box. Taronga Zoo said that they thought all the animals out there should be put down. Now, there were 15 to 20 big cats, and we're not talking like your ocelots and bobcats. We're talking big cats, tigers, lions, panthers, jaguars, leopards, the whole lot. I treated the cats with the utmost respect because they were continually on edge. We had cattle prods there, so the electric prods, to keep them under control or at least away from us. But most of the enclosures, instead of being swept out and cleaned out as a vacant enclosure, they were just hosed. It was the safest way to do it, because especially some of the big males, they would charge at the gates. And with the big cats, because they have like a 2 metre stride, they take one step and they're at the end of their enclosure, and they've got to turn around, do a half step, and then another one step, and they're back to their bedding. It was that small. I saw too much stuff that was wrong. So there was no genuine concern for the animals. If you had no genuine concern for the animals, and we were paid to look after them, to clean up after them and to feed them and all that, he had even less concern for us. There was one female black panther, and she'd obviously been raised by humans because she was quite approachable, but she was extremely malnourished. And I believe either one of the panthers or one of the leopards got to her and impregnated her. She was showing big time in the belly. Her teats were full of milk, and she was getting ready to lay out a litter. She disappeared overnight, and she was close to birth. And she went, and all we got told was, she's been moved on to another facility. And it's, well, what facility? Because none of the zoos would buy off him because there were no veterinary records. So to say whether they were disease free, and it's, well, why weren't we told that? Because we're supposed to get them prepared. Even to move animals between enclosures for breeding purposes is a major fucking operation. And he was too tight to pay for major operations. Wouldn't it be done under sedation? Wouldn't it already be prepared for a travel cage? And what I do know is that when the government did go in there were discrepancies in the logbooks or the manifest, the animal manifest, whatever it was that they were looking at. I never ever got an answer, like a direct answer as to what happened to that female, ever. It's been moved along. Now, whether he released any, knowing the type of bloke that he is, I would say yes, he would have, and he would have released the worst cases. If he was releasing any animals, I think it was first and foremost vanity. You know, he didn't want people to see that there were mistreated animals. My firm belief, I'm a 100% believer. I don't have any doubt now that there is quite a sizable contingent of big cats that have been released and have probably bred. And the reasoning I use is you've only got to look at some of those safari tours you can go on in South Africa and that. The only guaranteed way of seeing a big cat in any of those places is to go to a private sanctuary. I see holes in the argument that there are no big cats. I see massive holes in that. No, there's none. You've even got people from national parks and wildlife who've witnessed this. I'm not one to doubt. You know, if someone says, like my mate Boris, and he's not one for flights of fancy, he swears to God that he saw a panther on the Putty Road. Until they come up with definitive evidence that there isn't big cats running wild in Australia, I'll keep believing what I believe.
Not far up the road from the old zoo district just west of Sydney, something jumped in front of Diana's car that she'll never forget.
Yeah, I was picking up my son from Kung Fu on probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. It was just getting dusk, it was summertime. And Mulgo Road, I think you're probably, if you're aware of it, it was quite wide even before the expansion, just where the old Rowell Bridge was. And this cat jumped, this big black cat, it just couldn't be a cat. It jumped from 2 1/4 lanes to the median strip and then straight in front of me to the other side. It was like impossible. It had to be a panther. It was huge, it was black. definitely not a domestic or a feral. There's no way in the world. It was far too big and it was so agile. I was absolutely in shock. It looked like a leopard, but it was black. So it's fairly long-bodied, fairly long tail. Put a picture of a black panther in front of you. Maybe it looked like that. I know what I saw. You know, I'm a fairly rational person. There used to be a private zoo, like a rich person had a private zoo around. The story was that there were some escapees. I was just really shocked, and I was very disappointed I never saw it again.
When hundreds of sightings from a particular area are reported to government departments, they are then forced to investigate. Quite often, there is no authority on exotic wildlife in these departments, so it's common they reach out externally to various experts who have more experience than them. This allows them to produce a report which is much more well informed. But what if the evaluation from that expert doesn't follow their narrative?
I became the cat specialist because, well, I knew much more about it than most Australians because I worked in Asia for probably 20 years. And so actually I probably do know what I'm talking about. Their major motivation was really to not find anything. And all the documents they produce are heavily doctored and censored. And you said we don't get much truth from that place. Something has dragged up these goats up on the tree, really, and I think what comes to mind is a leopard. I don't find it surprising that they didn't want to promote that document. Yeah.
If you're enjoying Missing Panther so far, please tell a friend about it and make sure you subscribe to keep updated on each episode. If you'd like to support the show to help us continue this investigation, go to our website missingpanther.com.au. Hit the About button, scroll down and follow the prompts to forward your much appreciated donation. If you believe you've seen a panther or a big cat, or even if you believe you know how they got here, go to our website missingpanther.com.au. Get us through the contact page. I just wanted to give a shout out to Mick and his team at Yarra Valley Big Cat Beer in Victoria. These brewers love the stories of big cat sightings across Australia so much that they created the perfect line of craft beers to pay homage to this ongoing mystery. You can order some of this delicious range at yvbcbc.com. That's Yarra Valley Big Cat Beer. Get stuck into it. And again, if you're a fan of big cat stories, don't forget to get onto the podcast Big Cat Conversations with Rick Minter in the UK. And if you haven't seen it yet, make sure you tune in to a great Aussie documentary called The Hunt. You can find it on Discovery's on-demand channel inside the Foxtel app. It's about now I need to give a special thanks to Travis Hanley, who's not only one of my film school lecturers, but has become somewhat of a mentor throughout this journey and continues to guide me along the way with his wisdom and knowledge in the world of storytelling. Trav planted the seed for me to pursue this podcast, and I continue to hope it wasn't because of my lack of talent around a video camera. And a special thanks to Craig and Zaylee Bullin from Animals All Around, and also to Robert Perry for sharing their insight into the wonderful and sometimes unpredictable world of owning exotic wildlife. Missing Panther is edited and narrated by me, Ben Bede. Music is by Warwick Party. Mastering by Paul Gomersall. Voiceovers by Benny Brophy, Mina and Maddie Glenn.